Hello, good morning. Welcome to our channel. We're so glad that you're here today. We've decided, and that you have decided to join us this morning as we continue our series around the dating professional. We've been talking about dating, right? And exploring our relationships as they deepen. And today we're diving into the act of harmonizing love and work and the act of taking that intention of behind making time to really connect with each other. But before we get started, let me tell you who I am. I'm Leslie Gadet, self care coach for female coaches, female entrepreneurs, and course creators. I believe that self care is the lifeblood to our success in life and business, and it's why I am so passionate to help my clients prioritize it to support them in life and business so they wake up with more energy, joy, focus, and gratitude to tackle their daily activities and serve their clients confidently. And I'm here with my co host, Andy Lidstone. Andy, take it away and tell us who you are.
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you for that brilliant introduction, as always. I love it. It makes me smile and inspires me every time. Hello, everybody. I am Andy Lidstone. I am the unconditional coach, and I help people with boundary issues, control issues, and relationships. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about how to balance a relationship and a career, how to choose how much time and energy to put towards each without sacrificing one for the other. And this is an exciting topic for me. I love these topics as we get further and further into this series. This is really becoming more and more fun with for me each time we do it. So why don't you tell me about your experiences with having a relationship? I mean, you've been married a little while, and a career, which you've also had for a little while.
Yeah. So my experience has been, I guess, a little bit unique in that, you know, excuse me, my husband and I, we met back in 1995. So that's quite some time ago. And I had already been quite a few years into working as a legal assistant. And at the time, I was working for a really large law firm in Toronto. And, they had their structure around work and how I was able to like make that time really was so remarkable because they truly they truly had systems in place that allowed myself to, if I could not stay to do like an overage of work beyond my daily time slot, there was always people that are willing to step in and assist with the lawyers. And so they had a really great system in place.
Mm.
That allowed me to then spend time with this person, getting to know him, to see if, we could if our relationship was worth exploring more, if I felt like it might lead to something more than just, the passing fad of, a new relationship. And the reason why I say that is because I had been out of my previous long-term relationship for all of maybe, I would say, like seriously out of it for about 3 weeks. I'd been going through a breakup with someone who I'd been together with for 7 years, and we it wasn't like everything was amazing right up to the moment we decided to split. It was a progression of things that were happening, and there was really um, a lot of like there was miscommunication that what I wanted wasn't necessarily what he wanted. Anyways, to make a long story short, I was only really out of my relationship for about 3 weeks, and so you could have looked at this as a rebound.
Mhm.
But at that point, I just decided I already knew what I wanted and what I didn't want in a relationship with someone. What I wasn't willing to do was allow myself to lose me in the process, which I'd done many times before, including the relationship that I'd gotten out of just before meeting the man who I would soon marry, who would become my husband. And so I knew that I wanted to still be able to do me, to be me, to in all aspects, spending time with my friends, my family. Those things were important to me. My career was important to me, and the person that was going to come into my life, those things needed to be important to him in order for it to work. That was just those were my that was what my decision was around what the next relationship would look like. Did it mean that I wouldn't be able to be flexible? It didn't mean that, but it meant that I wasn't going to lose myself, and so
Right.
and my ideals of what a healthy relationship could look like. And so as we were going through the beginning stages and started to getting to know each other and sharing our hopes and our dreams, we shared a love for living where it's warm. And I just happened to have an additional part to my story that he didn't know about, which allowed us the opportunity to start creating a lifestyle, which we've now been living for a little over 27 years, and which is I was born in the United States, but I was also raised in Canada. I have the privilege of having a dual citizenship. My father is American and my mother is Canadian, and so having the dual citizenship allowed for us to then go and explore different places. Now we both knew that we didn't want to start our lives working and then, or to live our lives working and then eventually retire and then start living our life. We wanted to actually get out the door and do it right away.
Right.
So when I say my situation's a little unique, is that being a legal assistant, I felt confident enough to take my skills that I've been cultivating for. By the time I started at 19, so when I got married, I was 33. So that gives you a little bit of context behind how long I've been doing it. So it was really a career. And going down to the U.S., I thought felt confident enough that I would be able to land on my feet. Now that
Hmm.
was it was a little bit hard because in the US it's a little bit different dynamic in how they approach someone who maybe worked in the corporate environment like myself. They wanted you to be still more specialized. So whether that was in maybe mergers and acquisitions, so you knew all about that, or maybe in corporations, in forming corporations and minutes and all of those things. They wanted you to be versed in that. Whereas in Canada, I found when I would be in different uh, large firms, they were more open to you being able to support the lawyer from a perspective of the assistant, helping him to run his practice, but not necessarily having to have the entire knowledge base, if you will, like
Hmm.
as a paralegal. And so, unless of course you were in litigation. So again, getting back to the story is that I was able to finally land on my feet. I did find a job working for an attorney in a law firm, a small firm that he was a guardianship attorney. So, and he did something else. I can't quite remember what it was, but I was learning something new.
Hmm.
And I was able to then, over the years, we've moved, as you know, I could go on, but we've moved over the last 27 years. We've lived in, all over. We've lived in Florida. We're now in Florida again for a second time of staying. But we lived in Florida, and then we moved back to Canada. We lived on both coasts of Canada, and then we ended up moving down to California and then over to Las Vegas. So I was still able to then still work for different law firms on both in both countries and still pursue my career. And then I ended up moving into paralegal role. And what I've found is that uh, when I was in the U.S., it was really more stressful. My job, I felt, was really taking a toll on my relationship because it was taking up all my time and my energy. And so when I stepped into entrepreneurship, meaning that I ended up becoming an independent contract worker to help to still support them, but also then stepped into becoming a coach. That's when I think I really actually understood how to cultivate a closer relationship between my love, between my relationship with my husband, and then also what I do for a living, and
Hmm.
being able to like find that balance for the two of them. But as I said, my situation is a little unique. Some people, they do stay in one place for a long time, until they retire, and then they go out and explore the world. Whereas we did it while we've been together, and so I've
Hmm.
worked in different places and lived in different places and grown as that has happened.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people while they may stay in one place or a small selection of places within one province or within one state, people do generally switch jobs. They just might not switch homes at the same time they switch jobs, much like you would move to a different place and therefore your home and your job would change at the same time. Um, I feel like many people don't, have all that much change at once. Some people do. I mean, you're not unique in that you're the only one that does that, but I do believe that you are, of the more rarer types that of people who do move around for their job as much as you do. The career I would think would be similar to that I can think of off the top of my head is a military career where they would move, based on their different postings. Um, and you did change the identification of your career and how you do it in order to support your marriage, in order to support your relationship, and I enjoy that. I like that. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to hear your story first, because you have made some choices to balance your career and your marriage, right? So in this conversation that we're talking about is how to have both and how to have time and energy for both. It really is about, you know uh, spending enough time and energy on either one that you feel fulfilled. And if one is taking away from the other, then taking a step back and going, what is it that I'm sacrificing, and is that something I actually want to sacrifice, or is there another way I want to do whatever the thing is, whether it's my relationship taking up more of my time or whether it's my career taking up more of my time? Is there another way I want to do that so that I can have the balance I'm looking for? And just to clarify, balance doesn't mean equal. It's common knowledge we spend much more of our time at work than we do with our significant partner. Um, that isn't always a bad thing, and not everybody does, but most people do spend more time at work. I think they say we spend more time at work than we do sleeping, and sleeping is the next most amount of time we spend doing something. So, third or lower on the list is our partner. So it doesn't have to be equal amount of time. It doesn't even have to be equal amount of energy, but you do want to be careful about your level of commitment to either one. For myself, I wouldn't say I had much of a career. I had different jobs. I worked a lot in retail, um, and I didn't do so by choice. I tried several times to get into specific careers, but I didn't have the skill set, or I didn't have the whatever the talents that particular employers were looking for. So I spent a lot of time in retail, and and I therefore the balancing of the career, I didn't have much choice. I had to work the shift work. I had to work early mornings or late nights or random hours at whatever time the stores were open. And it did have a negative effect on my marriage, and on my relationship with my children. And it had an especially negative effect on my friendships. I had almost no friends when I was married, and not because my wife didn't want me to have friends, but because I didn't have a career, I didn't have a job that allowed me to have those kinds of connections. I didn't have space, I didn't have time. I mean, I might have different times, different days throughout the week, but it was never predictable. It was never schedulable. I could never make plans. And it was really hard to have friendships when you can't make plans. So one of the things that I talk about with my clients in their relationships is to make sure that they're satisfied with how much time and energy they give to either their romantic relationship or their career. Are you happy with how much time you give to those things? And do you have time left to give to your friends and family? Right? Do you have time left to focus on your other relationships as well? Because you don't want to devote everything to just those two things, because then you lose some version of mental health. Um, so it's important to find a balance, but like I said, a balance isn't about equality. A balance is about what feels good, what feels right. For example, I live in oil field country, so there's a lot of couples here where they get married because they have some long-term goal in mind in common, um, but their daily life goals are not, which works for them because in oil field countries, the or in oil field country, the a lot of times the men will get married and work out of town for weeks and months at a time, and the women will get married because the man's going to be out of town most of the time. So she knows she's going to be managing her career and the family and taking care of the home, and she knows she's going to be managing that. And a lot of women who get married to those guys do so on purpose because they want to have that that security of being in a marriage and the financial security that comes with working in the oil field, but they also want the freedom to basically run their life, run the family, run the home. A lot of women do. Now, of course, there's plenty of women who have a problem with that. My ex-wife was one of those. My short stint in the oil field didn't work out well for our marriage. But a lot of the guys out this way do. A lot of the women do like that. So it just depends on what your values are. It depends on what it is you want. And like I said, it's not about equality. It's about making sure that you have the balance you want, the amounts towards each of those that you want. And that's something I liked about from your story is you did spend more time at work than you did with your husband. And when you found a balance with that, it wasn't always bad. It was only bad when work was requiring more than what you were willing to give and you had not enough time with your husband, when you had to make sacrifices. But you understood from the very beginning, like you said, it was a choice you'd made from the very beginning that your career was important. So you knew you were going to be spending more time on your career than you were with your husband. And he was okay with that. You're okay with that. It made you, I mean, 27 years is a hell of a rebound relationship, right? You guys did well. And that's because you talked about this stuff early and you shared some of your values early. And you made a commitment to work things out, right? And keep going. So that's one of the things that I like about your story, and I think it exemplifies how to do what we're talking about in this video.
Yeah, one of the things you also, what I like about what you were saying about the balance, the work-life balance, a lot of people think, oh, there's, they push back on it, or some people will say there's no such thing. And it's, again, what you said uh, really does support that it's not about them being equal. Like some people think, oh, I have to spend this much time doing work and this much time with, personal. And it's not about having like that equal scale. It's about having, some days my job is, takes more of my time, but it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that my time with my husband is not quality time spent. That's the
Right.
difference. That's where you find the balance. Is because when you know and you have structure around your days, you have clarity about what you're doing, you use your time more efficiently and you get more done, and you feel good about what you've accomplished, so that when you do step away to go spend time, whether it's for your own self-care needs or spending time with your loved ones, that you don't feel resentful of that time or feel like, no, I can't take time for myself because I have to work, because
Hmm.
you've already put in the time and energy and effort that is, quality time and effort for your business or work if you work in a traditional job. And the same thing for your relationships with yourself and with other people, is that you
Yeah.
can then go in and you don't feel that resentment, but you feel grateful. You're able to be all in and enjoying the time. And again, it goes both ways, not resentful of the time you're spending with loved ones or doing, taking care of your own self-care needs. And you're not feeling guilty when you're working, thinking that you should be with family, you should be doing things for yourself, because you found that balance that works for you, where you're all in, you're doing things efficiently, that it
Yes.
feels good. Like you said, it feels good for you. And
Yeah.
that's why I always say to people, I say to my clients, to women that I talk to anyone really that I talk to, that it doesn't have to look the same as everyone else. Self
Hmm.
care is not about there's this one size fits all model. It just doesn't work that way, because that would mean we all live the same type of lifestyle, and we don't. And I think
Hmm.
that's great. I don't want to be the same as anyone else, and I don't
Right.
think anyone should be. I think we should all enjoy what we have, enjoy our lives, enjoy our lifestyles, the things that we choose to do, and be able to take care of ourselves in the process so that we can enjoy all aspects of our life, both professionally and personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that in that it is about a balance. It is about finding what works for you, and it isn't a one size fits all. It's an individualized, personalized approach. It's what works for you. And of course, in your relationship, it's about what works for the two of you. So, one of the things that you and I both advocate is that in order to make that work, you kind of have to know what you each want. You kind of have to have these conversations fairly early in the relationship. What do you want? What are we doing here? What's the purpose? What's the point? Like, how much time do we want to spend together? How many dates in a week or a month or a year do we want to go on? How many evenings do we want to be spending, sitting on the couch and watching movies, or going for walks, or hanging out with friends and family, or whatever the thing is that we want to do. Like, what is it we want to do, and how much time do we want to spend doing that? What does it look like to have a heartfelt conversation? Is that 10 minutes of telling you what my day is about, or is that 2 or 3 hours of talking about the hardest emotions I feel? Like, what does that look like? And and each of us has our own personal opinion as to what we want from that. And it isn't just, well, I prefer the 10-minute conversations, and you prefer the 3-hour conversations. No, some people don't want to have conversations at all. Some people want to have, different styles of conversation. Some people want to do it, out at a restaurant, or some people want to do it in bed before they go to sleep at night, or some people want to do it, whatever the case may be. There's all kinds of different circumstances. There's all kinds of different values and preferences in how we do relationships. Imagine for a moment how many different houses there are in the world, how many different styles of houses there are in the world. Never mind how many different styles of houses there are in the States or in Canada, but go other places in the world. I mean, there's millions of them. Imagine how many different kinds of cars there are. Do you think there's that variety because we all want the same damn thing? Probably not. It's the same thing in our relationships, right? So I like that you pointed that out, that you accented that point, because that's exactly what's going on here. How do you harmonize love and work? You have these conversations early. And by early, I don't mean first date, but I do mean before you get engaged. Before one of you asks the other to get married, you should be having many of these conversations about what a future look like. And even after you have had that conversation about let's get married, you need to have more of these conversations about what does that look like. Some of the most some of the biggest reasons clients come to me about their relationships is because they never have had these conversations. They've just assumed that everybody wants the same thing they want, or that it's right to want what they want and wrong to want something else. It's right to want to, live together for a while before we get married. It's right to want to try out all the different things that we would normally do after the wedding before the wedding. It's right to want to do those things. Is it? I have a I work with a couple who were not on their first marriage, and they both decided not to live together, not to cohabitate, and not to have sex together until after the wedding day. What some might call an old-fashioned value. But this was not their first rodeo. This was not their first time being married, either one of them. They'd both been married previously, so they weren't a couple of teenagers that didn't know what they were doing. They weren't a couple of young adults that didn't know what they were doing. They'd been through this ring before, and they decided to make this commitment. And what they're running into now is how to make life decisions after they decided to do those things. What is it like to live together? We never experienced that before we got married. That's okay, but they did have some of the conversations. We're finding out they didn't have enough of the conversations, but that's okay, right? But this is what I'm getting at, is it's about sitting down, and you don't have to live together. You don't have to have sex before your marriage. You don't have to, try each other's toothpaste before you get married. You don't have to do many of these things, but you should talk about them. You should have the conversations about them. You should be, um, if you don't have these conversations and share your values, it's really difficult to create a lasting relationship. And that's one of the greatest examples that I have always enjoyed about your relationship with your husband, is that you talked about these things early. You'd already made these mistakes once, maybe more than once, and you weren't going to make them again. So that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why you're 27 years in and still going, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that one of the biggest things is because I went through self-development for me, as a choice I made for me,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what the outcome was. I didn't know that, because I started making changes with my life back in 2017 and deciding to having that conversation with my husband saying, we need to make changes because this life that we're living can't go on like this anymore, because I was feeling drained all the time of my energy. I had no time, no focus. I approached every conversation with him from an emotional place rather than just spending time with him. And that was just because I was just an emotional wreck. I saw how I felt.
Right.
And it was because my time was eaten up by work. And
Right.
I recognized that, we had talked about changing, moving from, we were living in California at the time. And I said to him, let's revisit the idea of Las Vegas, because we had talked about it before. But then we said, yeah, no, let's not. And Vegas is a lot more than just the strip where you see all the casinos and everything. It is actually quite a lovely place to live. It was one of my favorite places to live. And when we decided finally, I said, look, let's just start getting ready. We started talking about it and planning for 2018, like the early parts of 2018, to actually make it a reality. And so in March of 2018, I took time off from work, and we ended up going to Las Vegas for a week. We With the intention of finding a place to live and setting ourselves up, and so that I could go back to work on Monday and say, "Hey, I am giving you 2 weeks notice. We're moving, but I still want to be able to support you. I had a plan, and I still want to support you. I'm in the online space. I know it's doable because someone else had already in our work environment had been doing it for a couple of years. That I'd known her for a couple of years because I've been with them 2 full years of working with them in the office. So I knew someone was already doing it, and I knew that it was possible. And it was just through working with some of the senior attorneys in the office to come up with a plan to create this position that I still serve them. And here we are 5 years later, just over 5 years later, that I'm still in that capacity of helping them serving them online. But it was the self development that I also took when I had the time to actually start working on myself. That journey to learning about myself and to figure out why I didn't like the person staring back at me, and how could I learn to love her without judging, having that word but at the end of every sentence, and just be able to say I love myself wholly and unconditionally, and be able to then um, and just be able to then, as I said, work on me and become, heal myself from within. And when I did that, I started seeing changes. Like they say, the saying is to see the change in the world, be that change that you want to see. So I knew that the changes I wanted to see had to start with myself. And doing that really helped me become a better person for myself, a better person for the people in my life, my personal relationships, friendships, family, and then a better wife, better communicator, a better listener, and then being able to like have a better relationship with my husband that we still work on. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but we both now come from this place of really wanting to have the best relationships. So we talk about things, but it started with me making that decision. Sometimes it's not always both parties are on the same page. We got to go through self development. No, it might just start with one person. And that one person, the changes in them inspire the person in their life to show up different, to show up in a way that, they like themselves. They like how they are with you. And that's what's really helped my relationship, my marriage to be here at just over 27 years because I first did the work, which then helped to trickle into my relationship with my husband. And now he's, not necessarily going through self-development, but my care of me daily inspires him to show up differently, and that's where I think I've been able to have that harmony between love and career for me, like harmonizing my love, my life, my personal life, my relationship with my husband, and my work life, because I love what I do as a coach. I love what I do as supporting team member of the law firm, and I love being able to cultivate my relationship with my husband.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like that. So, in case you weren't listening, um, viewer and audience member, um, what Leslie was saying is part of harmonizing love and work is working on yourself. It's difficult to work on a relationship if you haven't worked on yourself. If you're bringing an old and used up version of yourself to your relationship, and I don't mean old as an age, but you're bringing the same version of yourself that you brought 20 years ago, maybe that version of you isn't useful anymore in the relationship. Maybe that version of you is worn out. And oftentimes, what's happening is, especially in our romantic relationships, we get into a habit of responding to each other's bad responses. We get into a habit of responding to each other's um, triggers. Oh, I know that if I do this thing, she's going to respond that way, or if I do this thing, he's going to respond that way. So I'll just do this other thing instead, and we layer that, and we layer that, and we layer that over the course of years, to the point where we're not even doing what we would normally naturally do. We're not even being who we naturally would be anymore, if we ever were in the beginning. And the thing I like most about what you said, and I've said this many times myself too, is it's not about both of you having to do the work. Um, as a matter of fact, if you wait until your partner's ready, you will likely end up divorced before you improve your relationship, before you even try, because you're two individual people. And one of the reasons why you've gotten in this position of conflict or misalignment, or not feeling the same way you once did, is because you've both grown as individuals, but you've struggled to grow as a couple. And in growing as individuals, you're both different people than you were when you started, but you're still responding to each other as if you were the same person. And therefore, one of you is all it takes to break the pattern. All it takes is one of you to stop auto responding the way you've been building yourself to auto respond within your relationship. All it takes is one of you to do that self care work, to do that self improvement, that self help, that personal care. All it takes is one of you to work on yourself, and the pattern breaks. Because now the auto responses they're preparing to respond to you aren't happening anymore. When he says a thing and you're not responding the way you used to, he has to come up with a different way to deal with it. He has to actually come up with something now, think about something now, because you're not responding the way you were before. Or maybe the things you're saying aren't the same things that he used to respond to. He'd have his auto responses, and you're not triggering those anymore. So something's different. And that pattern that you've built up over years breaks. And it doesn't break in a bad way, it just breaks. It's different, right? It's like the skin on the gravy when you let it sit for a bit. It's you break that skin, it doesn't make the gravy worse. As a matter of fact, most people just mix that right back into the gravy again. It just becomes gravy again. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you break that pattern, you have perfectly good gravy. And that's what we're looking for. It doesn't make it worse or doesn't make it better. Just break the pattern so that each of you recognize, wait a minute, something's different going on is here. And then when you do that, and it only takes one person to do it, and sometimes you have to do it several times. Sometimes you have to go through maybe a few months or even a few years of personal development before your partner will respond. And that's fine. That's what I like most about what you've said is you did the work. You were willing to put in the work to save your marriage, to save yourself first. It just so happened to also save your marriage. Happy benefit, right? When you put in the work to do your own work, it changes your whole life, including your career and your relationship. Your career changed, your relationship changed, your life changed, and you're happier, right? That's what I love most about that part of your story.
Yeah, I mean, and you said it didn't just happen overnight. It's not like we both wanted to throw in the towel. Like we both knew we wanted to be together, but it wasn't the most ideal relationship
Right.
until because things needed to change. And I know I've always known, and this is, and I know it can be frustrating to hear it, but you can't control someone else. You can't control anything else in your life except how you, as an example, how you, like there's a saying on my wall, I can't control the world, but I can control how I choose to perceive it. Well, it's the same thing for my relationships. You can't control your relationships, but you can control how you show up in it. So, and if that meant me doing the inner work, yeah, it did, because I knew there was some things about myself that I needed to address for me first. And then I was able to like, oh, this there's something really good about personal development. There's something to this. There's actually really there really is value in it by going through it. I didn't know if it was going to make things better for him and I. I just knew and felt as I was going through it that it was making it better for me, how I
Yes.
felt about me, how I showed up in my world, how I showed up in my relationship. It made me help me learn to, as I said, love the woman staring back at me, so that when I have conversations, I came from a loving place, not from an emotionally wounded place, which was what I was doing before because I wasn't happy. And, that whole saying, happy wife, happy life, it just, I will debunk that. And I know people may not like to hear it, but your, excuse me, your husband is, or boyfriend or significant other is not responsible for your happiness. They
Nope.
are not responsible to make you happy at all. It is your responsibility to make yourself to be happy in your own skin, to help yourself be happy, because no, if you choose, you decide that, you know what, I'm not happy, I don't like my life, I'm miserable. They can go up and down, they can get the moon for you, the stars, but nothing they do will make you happy because you've already chosen not to be happy. So it
Yes.
is your decision, it's your choice. And when you make that choice, then you start actually taking action from that decision. That's how you learn to be happy in your life. You know,
Yes.
it's choosing to be happy and then going out and finding evidence to support why you want to be happy, why you choose to be happy. It's not his or her decision, her choice, or sorry, her his or her responsibility. And so when that term gets thrown around, I just push back on it because I don't believe it and I know it's not true. And that's based on my own life because I knew that if I didn't decide to be happy and then start looking for supporting evidence, there's nothing in the world that my husband could have done, said,
Yeah.
or done that would have changed that for me. It had to come
Right.
from me.
Yeah.
So again, you want harmony in your life, in your love life, and in your professional life. You have that choice for harmony has to be your choice, and it cannot come from someone else doing things for you to make you happy. You
Yeah.
should be to to be in a healthy relationship is spending time with each other, enjoying, and you're happy to spend time with each other. That's where the how you're making each other happy is because you're happy spending time together, but it's not about the other person doing things to make you happy.
That's right.
So I just hope that if anything, when people watch this video, whether it's live or watching it back, that if they're in that place where they want more harmony, maybe they found themselves in a place like I was, and they're trying to figure it out, that in order for first of all, in order for your relationship to thrive, is look at your relationship with yourself. You
Yeah.
work on you, and you might not like to hear that, but you know, I'm glad that self-development is such a big powerful topic out there in the world today because this would have benefited me so much when I was first getting into dating. I would have loved to have known these things. It would have been so helpful. And I didn't have access to it, or I didn't
Yeah.
know that I had access to it
Right.
because there was no internet. There was, you know, I we didn't have the ability to be looking up things online and finding ways self-help. We had to go locally and look in the phone book and things like that. Ask a friend. So it's really important to understand that, like, it if you want that harmony, it must come from a choice that you're making first, and the same for your partner. And that's why when Andy talks about your values aligning, that's something you should talk about, because if you end up in a relationship where you wait for everything, whether it's living together, having a physical relationship with that person until you get married, these are conversations that you should have to make sure that you will have that harmony. Because if it all of a sudden you step into that world, you're married, and now you're experiencing that physical, you know, physical connection, and now you're experiencing what it means to live with another human being that you're romantic with, and that becomes a hard thing to figure out. If you didn't have those conversations early on, that's where I think I've seen a lot of trouble start for people that I know, is that they didn't
Yeah.
have those conversations that don't necessarily have to be hard, and not they don't have to necessarily be so deep, but it's just having that conversation so you know you're on the same page. So when
Yes.
you get there, you're not like all of a sudden like, oh, I didn't know you liked that, or I didn't know you wanted that.
Right.
And instead of being, in other words, blindsided, you already know, and you already know then whether or not to continue the relationship if it
Yeah.
aligns. That's why it's important to know your values align. That's
Yeah.
part of like the values system, is knowing, you know,
Yes.
relationships. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I want to point out a couple of things that you said. Um, when you want to work on your relationship, when you want your relationship to improve, focusing on what the other person has to change can only lead to more misery and the eventual breakup of your relationship. That's the only result that can happen if you focus on what the other person has to do. If you want to improve your relationship, improve yourself. Figure out what you don't like about yourself and change that. And quite honestly, you might not have any put any energy into what you don't like about yourself. All of your energy might be in what you don't like about the relationship and the other person, and that's fine. Maybe you don't see anything wrong with yourself. That's also fine. But you cannot find success in your relationship by waiting or expecting or demanding that they change. The only place that can lead to is the destruction of the relationship. If you want to improve your relationship, find something about yourself to improve. Even if you don't think there's anything you need to improve, we all know we're not perfect. We all know, even if we only know so as a phrase, even if we only know that because we've been told a million times in our whole life, we know we're not perfect. So even if the only knowledge you have is because you've heard it 1,000 times, but you don't actually know there's anything wrong with you, that knowledge enough is to that knowledge itself is enough to give you the ammunition to go find something to improve. If you don't like your relationship, if you don't like your job, your career, your family, your friends, if you don't like something about your life, and especially if you don't like the harmony between your relationship and your career, find something about yourself to improve. Discover something about yourself that you maybe don't like and work on that, because it'll do two things. It'll distract you and stop you from thinking about the faults and qualities of the other person that you don't like, which will give them the space to think about it themselves, because when you're thinking about it, then they're not. If you want them to improve, need them to improve yourself to give them space to. That's not to promise that they will, but they can't if that's your focus. And the second thing that'll happen is you'll become a better person. And the patterns that you've been living in with that person, that partner, will change. And when you change those patterns, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when you change those patterns, they can't help but change how they respond to you. Now they might change for the worst. And I've known a couple of people who've done that. But the vast majority of people change for the better. Your experience with your husband is by far the typical. When one of you goes through personal development, typically and very, very commonly, the other person improves themselves as well. It's rare that when one person goes through personal development, will the other person become worse. And usually the only time that happens is when the relationship was already abusive to begin with. And
Yeah.
in that case, improving yourself will help you escape the abuse. So work on yourself, figure out yourself. That's the result.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I think we've covered really what we wanted to cover today.
Yeah.
I hope that our audience that you've found value today. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. If you have any, comments around what we discussed, what has been your experience around having harmony in your home, in your relationships, and your personal and professional life, in your romantic personal life and your professional life. How have you been able to find that being able to create time for each other that you're able to be all in at work, but then when you come home, that time is sacred and you're able to
Mm.
really foster and create a deeper relationship with each other. How have you been able to do that? And that has that been around you doing some self-development work? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So please
Yeah.
be sure to put your comments in the comment section of this video, and we'll be sure to reach out to you. And if there's anything you want to hear us talk about, or you want or something we've talked about and you want us to maybe bring up again at some point in the series, please let us know, because or something that is part of dating and career that you'd love for us to cover. Please let us know. We're always open. We do know we do have a plan for this series, but we're always open to ideas,
Yes.
from you. So,
Yes.
yeah, Andy, anything from you?
Yeah. Just to repeat what you said, if you got any ideas, any suggestions, any comments, especially if you have any comments about the content we're talking about in these videos, we'd like to hear from you. Please let us know. Um, and we value your input. We value you watching. So thank you for putting in the time, for giving us your time as we explore these topics. We appreciate you most of all, and that you're who we're doing this for. So thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. And of course, as per the standard thing on YouTube, like and subscribe to the video or to the channel. Like the video and subscribe to the channel, and comment, and that helps YouTube get this out to more people. It helps YouTube figure out who should see more of these videos. The algorithm loves that. It's the magic that helps these videos get out to more people. So thank you for doing that too. Um, and if there's any way that we can help you, maybe not inside the videos, our contact information is in the about page for the channel. So you can contact either one of us or both of us, and we'll help you out as best we can. We love serving, so this is why we do what we do. So please give us the privilege of serving you also.
Yes, absolutely. So thanks, Andy. Has been a great conversation as always. I love our conversations. Thank you
Me too.
again. And we hope that you all have a great week, and we'll see you next Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern.
Bye bye, everybody.